Right, let's dive in, shall we? Because this week, the saga of Trump versus basic human logic takes another turn, this time targeting late-night TV. Specifically, Jimmy Kimmel. Now, Trump has a long history of being thinner-skinned than a grape in a wind tunnel. His recent fixation on Kimmel has reached a new level of absurdity. It began with a post on Truth Social. Trump, with all the subtlety of a foghorn in a library, claimed Kimmel's show was on the verge of cancellation due to terrible ratings and, in his words, a lack of talent. This was, to put it mildly, a complete and utter fabrication, a lie, a piece of fiction so blatant it makes Sharknado look sober. The claim was immediately and easily debunked. ABC had just renewed Kimmel's contract for 3 more years. The ratings were perfectly healthy for a late-night show. So why invent such a clumsy, easily disprovable lie? For Trump, truth is merely an inconvenient obstacle. He wasn't reporting news, he was trying to will it into existence. It's a strategy. Repeat a falsehood with conviction, use capital letters and amplification, and followers accept it despite a mountain of contrary evidence. It's less a political statement and more a toddler's tantrum on social media. This wasn't a one-off outburst, it was the crescendo of a long-simmering feud. Kimmel has mined Trump's presidency and post-presidency for material. From mocking his public statements to mocking his hairstyle choices, Kimmel's been a consistent, sharp critic, and Trump, who cannot tolerate being the butt of the joke, has been keeping a list. Trump has consistently used his platform, first Twitter and now Truth Social, as a digital bully pulpit to exert pressure on media corporations and call for the termination of anyone who dares to criticize him. He doesn't just disagree with comedians, he demands their professional annihilation. He has repeatedly called for the firing of hosts on MSNBC, CNN. He lambasted Saturday Night Live as a hit job. He suggested that networks like NBC should have their broadcast licenses investigated. This is a clear and chilling pattern of behavior aimed at silencing dissent through intimidation. These aren't just idle threats from a man shouting at his television. When a figure with Trump's political capital targets a specific person or company, it unleashes a torrent of harassment from his most fervent supporters. It's a tactic of weaponized outrage, where a single post can trigger a deluge of emails, phone calls, social media attacks directed at advertisers, network executives. The goal is to make the cost of employing a critic so high, so fraught with aggravation and potential financial loss, that the corporation simply gives in. Now, it's tempting to think that friction between presidents and comedians is just part of the American political tradition. And to some extent, it is. Presidents have long been a favorite target for satirists, and most have had to endure it with a clenched jaw and a forced smile. But what Trump is doing is fundamentally different, and a quick look back at history makes that difference starkly clear. The classic example is the relationship between Richard Nixon and Johnny Carson. Nixon absolutely loathed Carson's nightly jokes. Carson's monologues during the Watergate era were merciless. They chipped away at Nixon's public image night after night, turning a complex political scandal into a punchline that everyone could understand. According to insiders, Nixon fumed privately about Carson and fantasized about using the power of the federal government to retaliate against NBC. And yet, crucially, he never did. There was a line, an unwritten rule, that even a president as vindictive as Nixon understood he could not cross. Publicly demanding a network fire its biggest star was a step too far, an abuse of power so blatant it would have backfired spectacularly. Other presidents have had their moments of irritation. Lyndon B. Johnson was reportedly infuriated by the Smothers Brothers' anti-war comedy. George W. Bush was the subject of endless jokes about his intelligence and folksy mannerisms. Barack Obama was a frequent target for his perceived aloofness. But in each case, the response was, for the most part, to grin and bear it. The fear that Trump instills in corporate America is not just a hypothetical concern, it is very, very real. Companies are, by their nature, cautious entities. They crave stability, predictability, and friendly relations with those in power. The threat of a president or a major political party turning its fire on you is enough to make any CEO's blood run cold. This dynamic creates an environment where corporations are often willing to bend to political pressure to avoid becoming a target, a phenomenon that has become increasingly visible and has taken some genuinely bizarre forms. And for a prime example of this, we need to look no further than a recent and frankly baffling development involving the US government and the tech giant Intel. Earlier this year, the Trump administration, through a government investment fund, took a significant stake in Intel. On the surface, this was framed as a move to secure the domestic supply chain for crucial technologies like semiconductors. But the way it was executed has raised more than a few eyebrows, with critics labeling it as Soviet-style economic intervention. The idea of the US government becoming a major shareholder in a publicly traded tech company is a significant departure from traditional American capitalism. Why would Intel agree to this? While the official line is about strategic partnership, it's hard to ignore the immense political pressure of the moment. Imagine being the CEO of Intel. The government, led by a man known for his transactional and often punitive approach to business, comes to you with an offer you can't really refuse. Saying no could result in tariffs, regulatory hurdles, or being publicly branded as unpatriotic. Saying yes, on the other hand, ensures you are on the right side of power. While Trump has been busy fighting his imaginary war with Jimmy Kimmel, a very real and deeply disturbing story continues to haunt him across the Atlantic. During his state visit to the United Kingdom, Trump was met with widespread protests. But this time, the signs and chants weren't just about his policies, they were about his long and well-documented association with Jeffrey Epstein. Protesters held signs with slogans like "Trump and Epstein, a tale of two predators," making the connection impossible to ignore on the world stage. This international spotlight on the Epstein connection is not just an embarrassment for Trump, it's also a massive, throbbing headache for the British royal family. The visit, meant to be a display of diplomatic unity, instead became a backdrop for reminders of Prince Andrew's involvement with Epstein, the Duke of York's friendship with the disgraced financier, his stay at Epstein's island, the very serious allegations made against him by Virginia Giuffre. Having Trump in town with protesters screaming about Epstein was like pouring a giant vat of salt directly into that wound. It created a PR nightmare linking two of Epstein's most high-profile associates in the public mind. The optics were, to put it mildly, atrocious. Here you had the President of the United States, a man who once said of Epstein that he was a terrific guy who likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side, being hosted by a royal family desperately trying to distance itself from a prince who had to step back from public duties. It's an alliance of awkwardness, a Venn diagram of scandal where the overlapping section is labeled "Friends of a Notorious Pedophile." Every handshake, every photo op, every forced smile was shadowed by this deeply sordid connection. Back in the United States, the Epstein saga is far from a fading memory, it's gaining new momentum. Thanks to pressure from a surprising source, the U.S. Congress, a bipartisan group of lawmakers has been pushing for full disclosure. They've held hearings and demanded the FBI release its unredacted files. Those files include Epstein's flight logs and his client list. So, let's bring this all together. On one hand, you have Donald Trump, a former president, spending his days in a bizarre, one-sided feud with a late-night comedian, posting fabricated stories, demanding people be fired, and acting like a mean-spirited TV critic with a giant political following. On the other hand, you have congressional hearings digging into one of the most sickening scandals of our time, with his name and the names of his associates swirling around the periphery. Is it really a coincidence that as the heat gets turned up on the Epstein case, Trump's attacks on the media become more frantic and more absurd? This is a classic Trump maneuver, the art of the grand distraction. Because for some people it seems the only thing more frightening than a punchline is the truth.